Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities in Miniatures. And at the behest of everybody else, I let you guys choose which of the boxes of the Pinups of Death we were going to start building. Now, funny enough, everybody said I should start with the beginning, start with number 1. So this is the original Pinups of Death box. This was, I think it was during the Kickstarter? I don't even remember anymore. I've had it for a long time, never bothered to build it, so what better time than now, right? Right. I'm thinking moving forward, I'm going to probably, I haven't even opened this yet, pop the boxes and then start pulling interesting sprues out that I want to build, because otherwise I feel like I'm going to get overkill and burnt out having to build all these various pinups. It's like too much. Okay. So that's how we get the belt of gender swap. Right there. That's probably going to end up in that legendary card set. Huh, we don't even have any of the postcards. So we've got Allison pinup. Morgan. That was like a savior. Architect pinup. Kissia. Okay. The Forsaker. Helen, the white speaker. Preacher. We know that. Survivor. Great game. Hunter. A bunch of these I think I've actually painted the corresponding figure to. Yeah, I was a savior. Okay, they all have names. I don't think that's the case anymore so much. This was a different time and a different place when this was made, and the foam is stuck. Okay. So in this original Pinups of Death, what do we got? I think it's still available. 8 figures at the time? Okay. I don't know if that's changed since. These are definitely a bit more simplistic, and yet when I say that and I look at how many parts there are laid out here and how tiny some of them are, I still mean what I say. Some are more simplistic than others. The white speaker is a total of 6 pieces. That's nothing for a Kingdom Death kit. Our preacher. Architect's quite a few pieces. I think I have built and painted both the male and female architects. One was the beta build. That was like in a weird plasticky foil baggie from a Black Friday sale a while back. Okay, the Savior has 4 legs. Okay, I have no idea what that's all about. I'll have to figure that out. Oh, I think one is more scantily clad than the other. You can have one in a skirt or one running around without one. Our Twilight Knight is quite easy to build. And then we have our Pinup Survivor right here. These are almost quaint. I mean, it's like, compared to some of the other stuff I've been building, like those Echoes of Death kits, some of the newer Echoes of Death. I mean, they're a ton of parts. If you're curious about those, I've got them all posted. You're more than welcome to check those out. So here we have the Great Game Hunter, and with her ammo slave as well included. So, this isn't that bad. I have a feeling these are going to be pretty stiff and, straight compared to some of the twists and turns, some of the new, more modern plastics have been taking. You have them going every which way. I think there's a lot more flexibility in some of the newer stuff. So, looking at one of the older models of a Kamina sitting here. Sorry, not Kamina. The Messenger of the Spiral Path. But you can see he's very stiff, very straight. These are some of the earlier plastics, and as the line has continued, they have gotten way more dynamic. But not to say that they're bad models or anything at all. They're still pretty cool. So give me a sec, we'll get them all put together, and we'll see how it turns out. Okay, well, we got our first Pinups of Death box all put together, and it took me a little bit longer than I expected. And it's not like it was actually a challenge. If anything, most of it was pretty straightforward and easy. There were a couple of challenges. We can go over those, but I'm just going to start presenting models since I've got her handy. We'll start with the pinup white speaker. I believe that cloak was optional. She has a very low, tiny contact point on that base. Just be aware of that. Yeah, the more I look at it, I want to say there were like 2 separate shoulder parts. Up next we have the pinup Great Game Hunter. You'll notice she does not have her crossbow. I left it separate with the nude ammo slave holding it. I'll paint her and glue her separately. She's actually a little less scantily clad than some of the others. At least covers it up tactfully. We have the Architect. I want to say she might have had an option. I can't remember now. I know this thing annoys me, much like the other versions. Much like the Strider Princess, who has a similarly designed weapon. The pinup Twilight Knight. All of their chests were separate pieces, which was pretty standard for earlier Kingdom Death models. Doesn't seem to be as much of an issue. Actually, a lot of these were very straightforward in how they went together compared to modern ones. Here is the pinup Savior. She had the option of with or without the skirt. We went with it. And then there is her cloak as well. I kept that separate so I can actually paint her, and then it looks like it's just going to attach right underneath her hair. But you don't have to necessarily attach that part if you desire. She also had the option of whether or not you wanted to have the staff in her hand. You can have the sword and the empty scabbard as well, but I went with the stick. Got enough swords. Okay, here is the pinup Preacher, which needs a little bit more cleaning there. Couldn't get a good connection point between her hand and her sleeves. Probably need to put a little bit of liquid green stuff in there, or just be lazy about it. You do want to glue the hammer, which doesn't have any real contact point specifically for it. I would suggest glue that before you glue the head on. Everything else is pretty straightforward. She did have a different head option. It's either long hair. I think it was without the glasses. That was one thing that actually struck me, was a lot of these figures actually did have little various options, which I'm assuming can probably go with a lot of the armor kits. But since armor kits seem like they're getting phased out in favor of narrative sculpts, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Now, she was a challenge just trying to get her arms lined up, and I'm still not 100% sure if I actually did them correctly. This is the pinup Survivor. And again, I don't even know if I got the lantern on there correctly. Or all her pouches, but I figure it's good enough. It looks rightish, for lack of a better word. And probably the most challenging member of the bunch would be the Forsaker. So a lot of those little horns on her head were all separate, both on the helmet and then in her shoulders there underneath the helmet. That was fun. Having to line up the chains around her chest was a challenge, but actually it worked out okay. The last final obnoxious bits were getting her chains lined up, and then her waist armor. It doesn't have a real set spot. And once you glue that cloak on, it's going to be kind of a hassle to get in there and paint her back. But I think it's going to be okay. Now I want a new modern plastic Forsaker, though. That's a model that, was very important lore-wise early on, and we really haven't seen much since. So, a nice variety of figures, nowhere near as dynamic as what comes later. Remember, this is the very first set, and I want to say these were banging around since like the very first Kickstarter. So it's been a while. I thought I'd grab a couple of other plastics just to give you guys a good idea. Various ages of Kingdom Death. Using our Twilight Knight here as I knock over the Architect as kind of a baseline. So starting with an earlier model. Here is the plastic female Great Game Hunter. We did have a male one as well. These were originally supposed to be in the Lantern Festival with the other actual Great Game Hunter. She had a couple of optional parts as well. She was only available as of right now in the Black Friday bundles, but she's come back a few times, so if you're interested in that model, do keep an eye out on Black Friday. So you can see pretty much in line with each other. Obviously, they have the little base supporters on her. That would probably help. But when you start to look at more modern ones, a mid-range, for lack of better words, are in a Black Friday Ninja. Gets a little bit taller. And then looking at some more modern ones, we can see with the Echoes of Death Necromancer, or the Christmas Aya, or my personal favorite, the Echoes of Death Knight, you can start to see there is a bit of scale creep, but I don't think it's anything significant. So if you wanted to mix these in, I don't see why they wouldn't work. If you wanted to do something crazy like I've done before and plan on doing some more, and have full-on Frostgrave warbands of nothing but Kingdom Death models, I think it's totally doable. And the nice thing is, if you're not really fond of the pinup styles, they're basically all consolidated to these boxes. I mean, I always hear people gripe online about how, you know, the Kingdom Death stuff is always all these scantily clad ladies. Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, yes, they do exist within the line, but I think at least in terms of the plastic kits, these are the only ones you're really going to see. If you're not actively looking and shopping for them, I truly wouldn't worry. The only unfortunate thing is they're only available, at least for the time being, in these boxed sets. So, like, if you really dig the Forsaker, which I do, and honestly, she's probably my favorite of the bunch, that's the only way you're going to get her. I mean, there's still some cool models, and I have no issues with them, but you know, if there's one particular one, you're going to have to either go dig around for people breaking up the boxes, which is a rarity these days, or you're just going to have to suck it up and get the whole thing. In case you're curious how they stack up, if you've never seen any of these Kingdom Death models, with other figures from various tabletop games, just a quick rundown of a modern GW human. Space Marine, I don't know why they would be rolling with Space Marines, but you never know. Let's see what else we got. You want to throw some historicals in there? I don't think that's going to really work. You want to have them hang out with some Conquest boys. Now that's interesting that they're still significantly larger with a Privateer model. Actually, the size works out pretty well, I think. I think if you wanted to mix them in with fantasy games, it's the GW stuff specifically, I think, that's going to look really out of place. But a lot of the more modern stuff, if you have them with like Malifaux figures, actually they work out really well. Why they're rolling with Malifaux stuff, who knows? But you know what? You forged the narrative. So I'm not going to worry about that. I'll let you guys figure that out. Overall, an interesting box. Definitely an interesting box. If you dig the pinup style, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff here. The poses are a bit more sedate and static compared to what we see in the later boxes. The second pinup box is going to be a little bit more in terms of pose variety, but it's the 3, 4, and 5 boxes that really get wild and interesting. So I'm going to actually end up reviewing, I think, some of the later ones. I think I'm going to go ping pong around. So this is the first box, and then I'm going to do the last box. So eventually they're all going to be here, but at least for the time being, I think we're going to have a good mix of old and new as we review these boxes. Plus, I got to get to the boys. We got to have those plastic pinup boys, because you guys are going to have to suffer through them, whether you want to see them or not. I could care less. And actually, I've kind of held off on painting any Kingdom Death stuff while I wait for those guys to grace my painting table. So hopefully, we'll see them soon, and hopefully we'll get these ladies started as well. With that said, this has been High Lord Tamberlane with Obscurities and Miniatures, saying thanks for watching, and we'll see you back here soon. Bye-bye.